Welcome to Dad Talk Today. The podcast for dads facing some of the toughest moments of their lives. We are here to walk with men through divorce, keep them connected to their kids, help them understand their rights, and work for change in family law courts. Moms, you are always welcome too. We are all about advocating for shared parenting and doing what is best for our kids. Here is your host, Eric Carroll.
Guys, what is going on? Got my brothers in the house today, Mr. Jeff Morgan and Darrin Robinson. How are y'all doing today?
Doing great. Glad to be here. Thanks so much for asking me to come on, Eric.
Are y'all getting that echo?
I had a little bit of one. I can hear you right now. I can hear you just fine.
Yeah, man. So, I'm really looking forward to this conversation, guys. If you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe. And I've actually made it a lot easier for you today. If you look down at the bottom right of the screen, there's a little icon that says subscribe. All you got to do is hit it right there and we'll be good to go. And if you'd like to support our podcast, patreon.com/dadtalktoday. I am looking forward to this. It seems like our conversations on YouTube start getting better and better. So, guys, what are some of your thoughts on divorce court and what's going on in the United States at the moment?
Who wants to start, Darrin, you or me?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So I think the divorce courts primarily are a sham. And the reason I say this is, and I look at the issue as, Eric, I always talk about the issue of unilateral no-fault divorce. And what that means is that one person can, for no reason, that can even make up a reason that can petition for divorce. And I thought marriage was supposed to be an institution that actually had legal ramifications and that the state would protect. If you look in our Texas Family Code, it says that marriage is one of these things that, it's supposed to provide stability for people entering into the relationship in good faith, for the children. And marriage is a blessing to society. The state has an obligation to make things better for society by helping to protect marriage. But right now, when it comes down to unilateral no-fault divorce, a person can petition for divorce, and that person has a predetermined outcome. He or she will get the divorce. That is winning. Now, you might talk about the division of the assets and stuff like that, but the division of the assets should never even be taking place if it's a lawsuit that really should not be taking place. And people forget that divorce is actually a lawsuit. Could you imagine going into court knowing that in every single lawsuit that was brought against you, you would lose? It was only a matter of how much you would lose. And when you come down to issues like assets, you're talking not just about finances, you're talking about children. You got married and you wanted to be there, you and your wife, to be a unit, and this was where children were raised. This was the best environment for children. The best interest of the child is to be raised in an intact family with his or her natural mother and father, period. And you hope, hopefully, with a strong extended family and a society that supports marriage. But that is the intent of marriage from a societal point of view. From a two-person point of view, if there are not children involved, usually there is some type, not always, but often there is a church wedding involved. And in a wedding like this, or a religious marriage, there is a vow made to God. And if you are Catholics or if you're Orthodox, it also becomes part of the sacrament of the church. It is a church institution. Now, the state that always likes to talk about separation of church and state conveniently does not want to talk about separation of church and state when it comes to divorce. And if you go back a little bit in history, and you've heard me talk about this before, but if you go back to Bolshevik Russia under Vladimir Lenin, one of the first things that he did was to take marriage from the jurisdiction of the church and to put it under the state. So the church used to be the one that was in charge of the marriage and the divorce and stuff like that, but they made it a state issue. And then from there, they also said, we are going to permit people to divorce unilaterally. Unilaterally means only one person needs to do it. So what happens if you enter into a relationship, if you enter into a contract with somebody, you have two willing parties that enter into the contract. And yet all it takes is one person for any reason, for no reason. They can make up a reason, they can get out at any time it's convenient for them. I mean, could you imagine having an insurance policy like this that, they say, you pay us the premium, and then when you have your accident, they say we want out of the insurance policy. It's up to you right now. I mean, it doesn't work that way. Our society is based on contractual law. And in fact, it's interesting because in the U.S. Constitution, in Article 1, Section 10, it says the states shall not impair the obligation of contracts. So if we enter into a contract, the state is not supposed to impair the obligation of those contracts. It certainly is not supposed to incentivize or reward the person who breaks a contract. I'm bringing this right back to marriage here, because we all know marriage is a contract. Now, you might say, well, it's a different type of contract, but nevertheless, marriage has all the elements of the contract. There's a person who asks for a hand in marriage and somebody who says, I accept the hand in marriage. And then there's some type of exchanges. There are vows made. There are witnesses. Sometimes it's written. Sometimes it's just verbal. But all of the contracts, all the elements of a contract are present. And this is just from a secular point of view. If you look at it from a Christian point of view, you're talking about a covenant. Marriage, according to Christians anyway, is supposed to symbolize the relationship between Christ and the church. And that covenant between Christ and the church is an everlasting covenant. When Jesus Christ died for our sins, when he paid, when he purchased our salvation for us, and we entered into that relationship, there's a security there. And marriage is supposed to symbolize, typify, be the witness before the world that this is God's love, this is God's redemption toward mankind. But it's a covenant. It's not merely a contract. In fact, it's a contract, but it's a level higher than the contract. And so when you talk about divorce court, to bring it back to the original question, what has a person done to merit a divorce? Because divorce, again, if you look at our Texas Family Code, one of the first things they talk about is property rights. Marriage is not an entity in itself. Marriage has a lot of legal ramifications, property ramifications, and marriage is not just a private institution. Marriage is something that has a public good. And we know this because marriage is the best place for children to be raised and to become productive citizens. And we also know, too, that in the issue of divorce, it impacts children tremendously. High school dropouts, drug and alcohol abuse, unwed pregnancies, mental health issues, physical health issues, gang activities. You can look at every single social malady, and divorce increases, or it makes the person more vulnerable to those things. Human trafficking. Did you know also, too, that children of divorce are more likely to become rapists? You look at what it does to society itself. They're more likely to be involved in criminal activities. So this has a cost to society. And marriage, therefore, what we say, it's a public good. The public has an interest in this. And people don't talk about this, but if you go through a divorce, the taxpayer gets a bill. They just don't tell the taxpayer about it. And this was very interesting because it was a study done in 2008 by Edward Scafidi. Benjamin or Edward, I can't remember his first name, Benjamin Scafidi, I think, out of Georgetown University, an economist, and he said, if you look at the issues of divorce and unwed childbearing back in 2008, he said it cost taxpayers at least $112 billion a year, and probably even higher. But what's happening is we are not telling taxpayers this is really what it's costing you. You get a divorce, Eric, I'm going to get a tax bill. Darrin gets a divorce, I get a tax bill. I get a divorce, you both got a tax bill. But again, it's a hidden thing that's going on. But what's happened with unilateral no-fault divorce, when you enter into the marriage relationship, you think either you've entered into a marital contract, you've entered into a covenant. This is something that you're doing for life. That's what it's supposed to be, because the state will not give you a 2-year marriage contract. The state won't give you a 3-week or a 5-year marriage contract. It is a lifetime contract, and the only way you can get out of it is through divorce. But when they let one person force divorce, the state, I believe, is complicit and an accomplice to a crime. And I say this because look at the damage that takes place. It is something that causes destruction on society. The state is also responsible for fraud, because when you go and you get your marriage license, you think you're entering into something with legal value. And the state will tell you afterwards, after you find out, there really is no legal protection for this thing. I've talked with a judge, Eric, and the judge told me, he said, I cannot deny a divorce. I have to grant a divorce. I said, on what basis? Just the fact that somebody wants it. I can't tell you, well, today I don't think you're going to get a divorce. I don't think you need a divorce today. Actually, you can't. And actually, this is where judges are failing us, because there are such things as findings of facts and conclusions of law. And let me take this a little bit different way right now. But for example, if I'm traveling in a car and I'm going 85 miles an hour in a school zone, and I get pulled over and I get fined and whatever else, I did something to deserve that penalty, right? But if the school zone is 25 miles an hour and I'm going 25 miles an hour and I have my cell phone on, I'm watching for everything, and the police pulls me over and says, I'm going to fine you today. You say, well, what did I do? Doesn't make a difference what you did. We're just going to find you indiscriminately. You said, something is wrong about this. Now, with the issue of marriage, we do have, it used to be up until 1969 that marriages had to have some type of a fault-based reason for two people to get divorced. It had to be something, it can be, alcoholism, it can be beating your wife or your husband, it can be abandonment. There were certain things that you did that caused the remedy for the person of law to say, this is what's happening to me, I need a remedy from the court, and the court will provide the remedy. Today, a person goes into court and says, I don't want to be married anymore. Okay, well, that's fine. But why should it cost me half of my assets? Why should I be deprived of my everyday contact with the children? Why should the attorney general come after me and say, oh, you know what? There's nothing we can do to stop this divorce, but we can make you pay child support for the rest of your life. Or we can put you basically in indentured servitude, because this is what they will do. They will make you pay something. He said, I didn't do anything. I'm entered into this marriage contract with good faith. And good faith is something that I entered into it with. Why am I being punished for this? In fact, I would say the bad faith is being exhibited by our government, because the government is not defending the institution of marriage. And I also believe, now this is going to sound way far out, but I believe that because of the bad faith of the government exhibiting toward us, that perhaps we ought to be applying for compensation as victims of their criminal activities. They should be telling us the truth. If they're going to tell us marriage means nothing, except that it gives you a tax break, then say that. If they're going to say marriage is temporary, let them issue 2-week licenses or 5-week licenses or 3-year licenses, and maybe have a renewable contract. When you get a marriage license, a lot of things happen. Your legal status changes. That has ramifications on taxes. It has ramifications of children being born within the marital relationship too. It has ramifications everywhere. And the state is being abusive and tyrannical in the utmost ways that when they allow unilateral no-fault divorce. And as I mentioned, Eric and Darrin, you may know this too, but we actually have a case docket at the United States Supreme Court. If you go to the United States Supreme Court website and look under the case docket and type in PANCO, PANKOE, there is a case that is challenging the Pennsylvania statute that permits unilateral no-fault divorce. Now, is it going to be heard? We don't know. The chance of it being heard is very slim. I think the case is very well made. And what it's saying is this: the person against whom divorce is being instigated against, if the person has not committed any type of infractions, all you're doing is saying, one person says, I want out. It's my viewpoint that our marriage is insupportable. The other person can say, well, wait a minute, it's not insupportable. I didn't even know we were having any problems. I love this marriage. I want to be with my family. But the state always, without exception, 100% of the time, will side with the petitioner. This becomes a violation of the First Amendment Establishment Clause. It is establishing a viewpoint. It is saying that anybody who wants out for any reason, for no reason, we will take action based on his or her viewpoint. No type of infraction of the law, no type of fault is necessary on behalf of the husband or the wife. It is legalized abandonment. It is forced breakdown of the family that the state is complicit in, and these judges who say, well, there's really nothing I can do about it. Actually, there is. And even in our Texas Family Code, if there is a chance of reconciliation, they're supposed to recommend some type of counseling. They don't do that. So everybody's like, well, it's just a private issue. There's nothing we can do about it. And unfortunately, many of the churches don't speak out about this either, because this is also a religious liberty issue. As I mentioned, if it's a sacrament of the church or an ordinance of the church, pastors and priests everywhere should be telling the church, you get back. Unless, this is our jurisdiction. You get out of here. A couple of years ago, Eric, we had in Houston a mayor who was requisitioning sermons of pastors because they were preaching against homosexuality, saying it was a sin. And they're like, we're going to take the, submit your sermons. Well, there was an uproar against that. But the problem is that, we have already given them that ground. Because marriage, you're speaking against the political ideology of the day that says same-sex marriage and should be okay, and homosexuality is okay, and lesbianism is okay, and everything else. That's not true. I understand, and this is not to disrespect those people that have found the fulfillment in that. I mean, the Constitution does give us the pursuit of happiness, but I'm just saying, from a Christian point of view, and as preachers of the truth, we have to stick with what God says and not what culture says. But what God also talks about is the marital relationship. That the purpose that when a man and a woman, a man should cleave to his wife, and they should leave each other, and they should become one flesh. And Jesus said, if God has joined them together, let no man separate them. And I think this is also a warning to our state. If you have bad public policy where you are enabling divorce on demand, and that's what we have, divorce on demand. Oh, it may take a couple of months or something. It's still divorce on demand. Divorce for any reason, for no reason, simply because I want it. That violates marriage. It has stripped every legal protection from the institution of marriage. So every divorce court situation, to me, for the most part, it's a sham. It's fraudulent.
So that's the interesting thing about this. You can have a guy that, he went into this marriage. He's doing everything. He's a faithful husband this could be either or. It could be the wife as well, but finds out wife is cheating on him. She's not coming home, not taking care of the kids, goes to divorce court, and he gets screwed.
Right.
We're told that adultery is against the law. And I've had so many people that come to me, he's like, oh man, I got a good case. My wife was cheating on me. I'm going to get a divorce. And it won't. I was like, dude, that's not going to hold up in court.
Right.
It's just not going to hold up in court. Maybe back in the day it would have, but now, most of the marriages that are breaking up is because of adultery, and they don't even take that into consideration. How does that make you think about this, Darrin? Knowing that you could do everything that you're supposed to, and you're doing your parts of the marriage, but your partner doesn't. They go and file for divorce, and they get half of everything you've ever worked for, plus the kids, and you got to pay them child support and alimony.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely horrible. And I also wonder, what are the arguments that they have against this, and what are the you would think that because that this is the case and that it is a contract, that there will be some prevention type services that should be ordered around it. I heard one person talk about ordering premarital counseling and things like that, and seeing if couples have gone through that. What have couples done to ensure that divorce doesn't happen, or what have they done to prevent it? What have they done to try to stay together? And why aren't the court ordering these type of things and using that as a way to guide their decision on the outcome of the divorce? So, what kind of arguments do they have against that stuff?
It keeps you got to keep the money rolling, brother. We don't want to find things that keep marriages together, because there's no money in you having a good marriage. We want you to divorce. We want you to pay child support. And I feel like that's just the system that we're dealing with. We got a question here, and Jeff, you might be able to answer this. Vital Limits here on YouTube said, how does the appellate court system tend to treat fathers for dads who can afford to make it to that point when there is an issue with the family court judge's ruling?
I'm not sure that I completely understand the question. How does the appellate court system tend to treat fathers for dads who can afford to make? I'm not exactly sure. I need a little bit of clarification on the question.
So
yeah, brother, we want to answer it.
The people that can make it to the appeal court, how do they asking, how do they treat them if you can't make it to the appellate court?
What I can tell you is this: I've talked with some judges about this, and they've said that if you go to the appeals court, you can appeal things, but primarily what they do is they look at the procedures. And they're not going to overturn a judge's decision because that's his discretion. But the reality is, like I said, that one judge told me he has no discretion. He said, I must do this. And I said to him, well, actually, that's a violation of the separation of powers doctrine. You are no longer acting as a judge. You are acting as in a ministerial capacity or as a member of the executive branch. And in my opinion, I don't think you should have judicial immunity. I understand mine is the minority opinion, but these judges that say, we're exercising our discretion, what they're doing is they may exercise their discretion, so they say, regarding the division of assets and everything else, but they're not looking at the fact that what is taking place is fundamentally unjust. I should not have to lose anything. So it's like I said, if I'm sitting in my car and if I'm driving the speed limit, why should I be punished for speeding when I never sped?
He touched back on this and he said, are appellate courts fair? So okay. I haven't had much dealings with the appellate courts. I've heard of people that have made it there, and I haven't heard much good that have came out of the appellate courts. And then again, Jeff, we was down in Texas and I got to talk to some of the appellate judges. They told me they had never heard or never seen a case of parental alienation. Just from the No, I don't think I would have wanted to have been in that courtroom looking for results. I mean, have you seen many results when it comes to the appellate courts?
The only thing, and Eric, is I was down at the same time talking with those judges that were running for the position, and I also had gone to a couple of other meetings with them, and they know that there are problems in family courts. Okay, one judge told me, he said, I've heard, because I've been very vocal in one area, and he was from that area, and he said, I've heard. He knows that there are problems. Okay. But my understanding was from him, and I've never gone through this process, so others may be able to speak to this better than I, but my understanding is that they're looking more at the procedural aspect of things, how things are going procedurally. Did they violate the Constitution? And so again, I mean, if you go to an appellate court to necessarily overturn a decision, I'm not sure that that's going to happen. I just don't know enough about this. I wish I did. But what I've done as well as you know, Eric, I've made complaints against judges of the State Commission on Judicial Conduct, and as you also know too, probably, from my perspective, they are a pretty feckless, spineless organization. Lawyers covering for lawyers. I understand there's people that are not lawyers, but I have no confidence in them whatsoever.
So, Jeff, on the other side of this token, to what you were saying earlier about how easy it is to get a divorce nowadays, I'm going to throw this at you, Darrin, and get your thoughts on it first. But HC9 here on YouTube said the root of the problem, it's so easy to marry. Yeah. I don't think we hear that so much. It's so easy to get a divorce, but it is pretty easy to get married. I mean, what's your thoughts on that, brother?
That's what we're talking about with the prevention stuff, because I mean, how many people actually do? And I know before somebody talked to me, or before I really came to Christ, or really just got the moral aspect of life and, all that, man, I thought she was just fine. When I seen the girl, she was fine. I tell you what, this is how me and my wife got married, and and we had to go through some struggles and trials and tribulations and all that stuff just to, undo the reason. So me and her, I always thought she looked beautiful. I thought she was fine. I was in the same high school with her, and I never hollered at her in high school, but later on I did talk to her. And, when we talked on the phone, it was like, hey, you were abandoned. I was abandoned too. You were fatherless. I was fatherless too.
You connected over your pain.
You got trust issues. I got trust issues too. Oh my God. We so connected. And that was so wrong. So it was the looks. It was we was able to come together over our tragedies. We were able to relate to them over that. And we thought that was it. Like, this is the love of my life. And, we had the same things. We both like music, and we liked the same food. And she liked that we watched the same movies. And, oh, my God, this is the one. I want to marry this person. But we didn't go into how those trust issues made you act, or how do you get when you're angry, or what do you like when the pressures of life hit, when financial issues hit? How do you deal with those issues? We didn't really go into none of that, take time to look at none of that, or even learn. Like, that stuff didn't even come up in our head. And right. So we went to a counseling, we went to counseling, or, talk to somebody that knew about those issues, or talk to somebody that was married first. I think we could have avoided a lot of bumps in the road. But what we did decide is that, even man, we went through some really, really rough times, and we was like, you know what, because of our values with Christ, we was like, we're going to stick it out, we're going to stick together, and over time, those issues kind of dissipated, or we was able to work through them. But it was a very, very, very tough a moment there because we just didn't know how each other act. And then as different seasons came along, pursuing entrepreneurial ventures and things like that. How would this person be if I pursue something that's entrepreneurial? How will they act when I want to take risk with money? That type of stuff. So we had to find compatibility in a lot of different ways. So it's way too easy to get divorced because a lot of times we divorce when we marry over the wrong reasons. We marry over the wrong reasons, and about time everything hits the fan, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna get a divorce, and somebody's gonna pay, and ultimately, who pays the harsher price if you got kids involved is the kids.
The kids, absolutely.
That was such a good point, man, because especially coming out of a divorce, both of you had problems in your relationship prior to that. And you want to say, oh, this is what I've been through. This is what I've been through. And that's because you want your partner to know a little bit about you. Right.
Right.
And then you bond over that pain. And that is not what you need to be bonding over. That's how I got myself in my last escapade, man. I mean, you sit there and talk about that, but going back to what HC9 said, this might not be the most politically correct answer. I'm just going to be honest with you. It is so easy to marry. And for us guys, especially when we're younger, you get a piece of that thrown on you, you're ready to marry him. I love you. I love that. And it's so exciting. There's no other way to put it, but that excitement gets in there. I want to keep this. I want this every night, man. I want this every night, even in the morning when I wake up. And so you realize that excitement only lasts so long.
So long.
I'd like to be able to talk about that issue just a little bit because I think it's a very good point. What about the cultural ways people get married? Because I've lived in other countries, and a lot of times, they look at us like you're crazy. You're having kids, picking out future spouses. And in many countries, many cultures, it's somebody else who does the arranging. You lived in the Middle East, and it just was completely different over there. And one of the guys that one of my mechanics that is here, he's a Palestinian guy. He was telling me, he said, Jeff, I didn't even know my wife till I met her, and the first year was rough. But he talks about how love grows. And I've talked with a lot of Muslim people that have talked about this, that I knew that went through this type of an experience. And you're getting married, and it's not because I feel all of these wonderful gushy feelings toward her. If you're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, whatever, your maturity level of your brain hasn't even finished growing yet, and we still do that. But this is the idea that somebody else should be there with you to help. We say that 18 is the age of adulthood, and we all know that 18, well, whatever you want to say it, 18 is a very arbitrary age, and it's probably a pretty stupid age, honestly. But
that's still a kid.
Yeah, exactly. But you're making lifetime decisions, and some of the decisions can be great. I am not trying to say everybody who's 18 is whatever, but I'm just saying that, we have to look at what are some of the issues here. And we live in a generation right now that tends not to respect their parents. And yet, an issue like marriage, should we not be consulting our parents, perhaps? In many cultures, it's the parents who pick the husband, or it's the parents who actually negotiate something like that. And because at least what I've been told by some people is that I know my son, I know what he needs. And Darrin, what you were talking about, our strengths, we each have different strengths. A husband and a wife, if they have all the same strengths, that's probably not the best match. But sometimes we don't look at our differences as compliments. We look at our differences as clashes. How come she doesn't think like me? How come he doesn't do what I think he should do? And it becomes a source of enmity as opposed to saying it should be a source of strength and complementarianism in a sense. But when you also talked about getting out of marriage easily, it's easy to get into marriage. It's easy to get out of marriage, though it's a lot more costly. It used to be that the reason it was so difficult to get out of marriage is because you weren't supposed to get out of it. There should be a barrier, it's like a lock on a car. If you see cars that are open and windows that are open and stuff like, money laying on the seat, it might be very easy to reach and grab some money and just keep right on walking, right? Nobody's going to be watching you. But a lock helps to keep an honest person honest. And I think that when we get rid of the idea of some type of fault, some type of real reason for divorce, we make divorce way too easy. And the ramifications, Darrin, as you mentioned, who gets hurt? It's the children, and it's the children's children. Divorce has transgenerational ramifications. And for people who think that divorce is going to solve their problems, probably it won't. It probably will increase their problems and multiply them. But look at what's happening to our kids. 50 years of no-fault divorce, 50 years of family destruction. And as Vladimir Lenin said, destroy the family, destroy society. Look around us. How has this 50 years of family destruction, of no-fault divorce, helped our society? Have we gotten stronger? I don't think so. Anyway, I spoke on a couple of issues there, but
well, I'll tell you what, because of that stuff, though, I mean, you got the people that get married for the wrong reasons and then have this epiphany that they don't want to be married and that it's not for them and this, that, and other. And then you got those people like that who goes to a family court system. They saying, okay, we can't resolve our own issues. We can't get out of this marriage, right? So family court, what say you? Well, family court really don't have an emotional attachment to it. They don't really care either way or not. They don't have the love feelings attached to it or what's going to happen to the children and all that. They're there to make a decision. So the
a predetermined decision.
Yeah,
there is no making any decision. It's there will be a divorce. It's just dividing things up afterwards, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, the quickest thing they do is just have a set rule of, okay, this is how it goes down. This person, they get divorced, the money goes here, the money goes there. These are all preset rules. And, you know, it'll look like they're debating on a lot of issues, but, you know, a lot of times they're not. But when you have that system in place, because the people those of us that get together for the wrong reasons and all that kind of stuff, because you have the need for that family court system in place, there also going to be people who see it as a loophole and says, oh, okay, well, I can go get easy money right here. I can go get an easy living. If I can get married to this person, then divorce them, then that's a free paycheck for the rest of my life. So you'll have people that exploit the loophole, and you'll have people that shouldn't have got married in the first place, probably that also needs that system. And the court just there. And so the court will look at it like, okay, well, if they're going to do this, how does it benefit me? You know, how's it going to benefit us? They're going to get money out of it some kind of way. The lawyer's going to get paid. The judge is going to get paid. The system's going to get paid. And it goes back to because we either make the wrong decision or we both make the wrong decision or make the wrong decision to marry someone who is just conniving. But I do think that there needs to be laws and barriers in place for people that are there that are just conniving. You know, you just want money. You just want the check. Or in the ones that do have those initial problems where they just got married for the wrong reasons. There still need to be some fairness there. It shouldn't be just a one-size-fits-all type of judgment. And all right, here you go, going about your business and on to the next case. You know, they're not really there for a purpose other than to give out the standard rules and regulations and see how it benefits the courts. They're just a neutral entity.
So Darrin, you made a very interesting point there, and I've heard some people say, how do I know if I've married the right person? And by and large, all you have to do is say, well, whose signature is on the marriage license with you? That's the reality. You can make things work. You can make things work. And you know what? Maybe it didn't work out. I'm not saying get rid of all divorce. I've never said that. But I do think that what we've talked about is divorce should not be so easy. And when you were talking about the lawyers and law situation, there was a very interesting proposal that I saw that instead of having any attorneys involved, because attorneys make money out of enmity, out of strife, out of some type of, they want to inflame things. Really what we should do is have a process in place, perhaps, let's say for the first year, no attorneys are even allowed to be involved. We'll say you do want to get divorced for some reason, and the first thing would be a notification. But during that year, you must go through certain things that try to restore the marriage. Because one of the things behind no-fault divorce was that it was supposed to take away the enmity, the strife, the anger, the blame game, and it was supposed to create an environment to allow people to reconcile their marriages. That was supposedly the intent. And it was actually successful. But when it came down after they passed no-fault divorce, they wanted to get rid of that aspect of it. So, it was the marketing tool was, here's what we're going to do. We're going to make things less acrimonious and everything else. And it's done just the opposite of that. And really, instead of being used as a tool to say that we can actually help reconcile marriages, it's used as a tool to destroy marriages at will, to enrich divorce attorneys. And I know I've heard some of these divorce attorneys say, well, we don't make that much money. Well, I talked with another guy. He was a police officer. He said, he had to write tickets for people. He said, man, as a Christian, I couldn't do this. I just had to have my quota of tickets, my speeding tickets. So I went into law. And then he said, man, I went through a divorce. And somebody said, well, if you want to make some quick money, become a family lawyer. And then he said, so he did that. And then he said, but now he's like, I'm a Christian. I've got to be able to sleep with my conscience at night. So now he's a criminal lawyer. I asked him, hey, do you mind? Can I interview you? He said, listen, don't put my name out there, because if they know about this, I'll never get any more work because the judges will rule against him. This is a scam. It is a business. And these attorneys, I hate to say this, but I mean, when they say, well, we represent men and we represent women. The reality is they represent who's ever going to pay them. And they do not look at you necessarily. And Darrin, I was at a conference with these attorneys, and the attorneys were talking among themselves. Do we have any obligation to make these people whole after we've destroyed them? They're attorneys. I said, well, don't destroy them to begin with. Because when you go to a divorce court, what do you have to do? You have to show that your client is the better parent, and that this client needs to get the children and then the child support and everything else. So what do? You destroy the other person. He's this, he's that, she's this, she's that. You create enmity. And whereas there was an opportunity for people to reconcile their marriage, to get back together, which is in the best interest of the children, they instead make it so that it's much more difficult. And that is the perversity of the divorce industry, of the big business of divorce. And these judges, I'm sorry, in my opinion, that some of these judges let these things go on too long. I've been in some of the courts, as you've known. I've seen some of the stuff. I'm absolutely shocked and amazed at what takes place in there. And but our whole state policy is written that way. That's why, we have to change things at a legislative level. But I think at the same time, we need to go into the courts and start exposing this stuff. But divorce should be more difficult to get out of. And we should say, this is what society should be saying. If you get divorced, Darrin, it's hurting our state. It's hurting our community. It's hurting our neighborhood. It's hurting our church. It's hurting every single thing in society. We have an interest, Darrin Robinson, in seeing you have a strong marriage. And we have an interest, Darrin Robinson, in knowing that your strong marriage is going to produce strong children. Children that are going to be well-educated, children that are going to be productive in our workforce. When you look at a lot of the people that are not productive, look at their family background. Often they are products of divorce or of families that were never formed to begin with.
Right. So I agree with everything you guys were saying, and I definitely believe that's a contributing factor. But as much as the system's to blame, guys, I believe we have a societal problem. You go back to my grandparents. My grandfather was 16 and my grandmother was 14 when they got married. They knew each other for 3 days before he went off to fight in World War II. Okay. They was married 67 years. And at the end of that, it was like one of the most beautiful love stories that you had ever seen. Now you turn on the TV and the episodes that many of the kids like to watch nowadays, you're always going to see the mean boyfriend or the mean husband. And now here comes this knight in shining armor that they go and having an affair. And then, he saves them from this bad relationship. Everything has really went to that excitement, those fireworks. And I'm going to tell you, marriage is commitment. It's a lot of hard work, and we don't see the hard parts of marriages sometimes, but those are what makes the whole thing worth it. Knowing how to stick in there when it gets hard and appreciate your partner. It's not always going to be happy times, guys. You might not even want to look at the person across from you at times. Okay. That first year after you've been married to them for a while, there's things that you didn't see before that just start getting on your nerves. Maybe they pick their nose too much, or it's just little nitpicky things, but that is what makes your relationship stronger. And if you give up on that just because these little problems, you go find somebody else. Guess what? That process is just going to keep repeating itself.
And I tell you what, and to your point, the societal thing, man. When you giving the woman of the year to Cardi B, who makes a song called WAP. That'll tell you a lot about where we are when you look at Instagram and you look at,
TikTok.
It's super, super sexualized now. So, for the horny teenager or the horny father or whatever, it'll make it hard to want to stay married and be with the same person over and over again and all that. But I'll tell you this, man. Me and my wife, we've been married 7 years now, and we still got a long way to go. We got a lot more trials and tribulations and issues to go through. But we was arguing at first about, like you said, the little stuff about trash, or whose side the closet is messy, or just little bitty stuff. Just irritating stuff we were arguing about.
It happens.
We were sleeping in different rooms, not talking to each other. Just how to figure it. How do we figure this out? And I tell you what, in 2015, my mom died. She died of stage 4 cancer. It went to her heart, her lungs, and her brain. And when she was on her deathbed, at some point, sometimes I could hear what she was saying because the cancer in her brain, and sometimes I couldn't understand what she was saying. But what I could understand when she was talking, she was like, I got to get out of this hospital because I got to pay my bills. I got to pay my rent. I got to go pay my car note and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, Mama, just chill out. Just rest. Get your rest. And, don't worry about all that stuff. We'll figure out all that later. And 2 days later, she died. So I literally watched her suffer and struggle and worry all the way to death. That was a very, very hard thing to see. And it threw a fire in me. Somebody said there's 2 types of pain. There's a pain that hurts, and then there's a pain that alters you. That was a pain that altered me, and it took me dark for a little while. It took me to a really, really dark, depressing, hateful, mean, angry place. So, man, when I came in the house, oh my God, the whole house would feel it. That rage, that anger, that depression, the financial issues, the marriage issues, it was so much that hit. And, I was in a dark place, but my wife, I would be in the bed at night, man, and I would think I would be in the bed for like 2 days. And I would say I had no clue because my mind was going, but man, I was not even moving. I was just laying there and thinking about ideas and thinking about what to do and this, that, and other. And to me, I was busy, but I was really just laying there. So my wife was coming in the room at night, like 3 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, or just anytime, and she was putting blessed oil on my head and putting crosses on my head and praying over me. And I was so hateful and mean at that time that I was acting like I was asleep, like I wasn't even noticing her. And in my head, I was like, man, I wish she'd gone somewhere, but I wasn't talking to her and none of that stuff. But she kept praying. She kept being there, and she stopped nitpicking, and I stopped nitpicking and talking to her because it was in another place. It was a real issue. A year later, her mom died of cancer. And now she was in that place, that dark place. And so the roles switched. I'm praying over her. I'm looking out for her. I'm worried about her. I'm worried about her health. I'm worried about her mental stability. I'm worried about the kids. I'm worried about the home. So when life really, really hit us, when it hit us in a major hard way, because of our faith in God, because of how we prayed, because of what we believe, we knew that all the other little stuff that we was arguing about at first, that stuff didn't even matter anymore. It was about a life or death situation. And that's when we started to come together. That's when we started to realize that marriage is something completely different than just fun and sex and not want to be lonely on a Saturday night and the movies and all that cuddle stuff. It was very much so a life agreement. It was a financial decision, a business decision. It was a children decision. It was a lot of the marriage is a lot more than just those ooey gooey feelings. That stuff goes away at some point. And when life really, really hits hard, because it will hit, and the Bible says when you get married, there will be troubles. When it really hit, that's when you will find out who you really married.
So I'm curious, and I'm going to be completely honest. And I know my mom, I don't think my daddy's not here any longer, but I don't think they would, mind me talking about this. There was years, especially when I was a teenager, early teenage years, that I wanted my parents to get a divorce because they had hit that stage where it seemed like they was arguing all the time. And, but no matter how bad it got, guys, and I mean, even to the point that I was hoping it was going to happen, no matter how bad it got, they stayed together. And once they got over that hump, and especially, my dad's, later years, it was one of the most beautiful marriages that you could have ever seen. And, they showed me that, though. They showed me that no matter how hard it got, they stayed in there. And now I go back to my marriage when everybody's saying I should have left a long time ago. I fought tooth and nail, probably hung on, but I wanted to make sure I had done everything I could do. On the other side, my spouse, she came from a divorce home. She was a product of that. How is these adverse childhood experiences, the the example that mom and dad are given with their marriages, how that gets passed on to us, playing into effect. So you go back to the, our parents' age, most of the time, but like, it took something very big for them to get a divorce. The divorce just was not as common. We're at a 55% divorce rate now. So imagine this generation that is seeing that 55% divorce rate and living in that home. What's it going to be like 10, 20 years from now? Yeah. That is my fear. We've got to start putting healthy marriages back together. And divorce court just does not promote that one bit whatsoever. And I'd like to get some solutions to be able to bring that up to them. I'd like to actually get some more conversations going on this show about healthy relationships. I could use that myself. I mean, I think we all can. It's easy to sit here and talk about it, but practicing it in our relationship day after day, that's where the real substance is.
Yeah, I think what marriage worked for us is I really had to just start studying her. I mean, I had to study her moves. I had to study the way she think and all that kind of stuff. And once I understood her, it wasn't so much about, hey, you need to fix this and you need to do this and this for you, this where you falling at, this and other. What ultimately happened, I started looking at myself. Why am I reacting this way? Like, she making me mad, and this is like, why am I reacting to her this way? Why am I letting her do me like, it's doing nothing but frustrating and hurting me and hurting the way I approach her. So even though I would approach her with something that was probably right, because of the way I came at her, she wasn't going to listen to it. And, and then again, I had to deal with my wife's personality. Somebody else's personality may be different. So you have to know the person that you're marrying. And again, like society, like you said, it doesn't even promote marriage anymore as a good thing. All you hear is marriage is hard. Marriage is hard. And you hear about all the horror stories with marriage. I mean, so marriage really got a bad stain on it until somebody personally feels like, oh my God, I love this person. I want to marry them and be with them for the rest of my life. When all that temporary stuff goes away, then you go back to a society that permanently says marriage is hard and marriage is rough, and they got this bad stuff, which all is true, but there's a beauty to marriage too. There's a love to marriage. There's a thing with marriage that, man, I wouldn't trade being married for anything in the world. I love it, but it's hard, but I do love it because of the beauty of it.
Darrin, Dr. Farrell, you just brought up something that he spoke about the other day, and it blew my mind. I love hearing him explain these things, but he's talking about how this wife and this husband, all right, their son has this problem at school, and he reaches out. Okay, mom takes off. Baby, are you okay? I'm coming to get you. She comes home. Dad's sitting there watching the football game. She's like, what are you doing? Do you not care? Do you not know what happened? But that was his way of dealing with it and letting his son know you need to find out some solutions and get over it yourself. That's his way of facing the situation. Whereas the mom, you react different to different situations.
Oh man, I want to set that up because I loved when he took me there.
When
I heard him say that, I pulled the car over and got out. Like, I hit the hood. I was like, that's good right there. That's good.
Yes, sir.
It was good stuff. But he was saying that the son was with the father for the weekend. And they went and they was playing basketball and they had a game, and he left his kid out there with the other kids to kind of just, enjoy yourself. So the kid ended up getting in a fight or something like that and hurt himself. And he came back home, and the dad like, what happened to you? And so the dad starts to tell him like, okay, well, did you see the fight coming? Is there something that you could have done to avoid the fight? Could you walk away? What were the signs that you see that was coming? And that was his way of rectifying the situation to alert him like, hey, you're going to be in the world at some point by yourself. These are some signs you need to look at. These are things you need to avoid. And now you know that lesson. Well, he leaves the father for the weekend, and now he's back with mom, who basically permanently has a kid. So he's back with the mom, and she's like, what happened to you? Well, I got into a fight. Where was your dad at? He was at home watching the playoff game. See, that's just like your father. He's never around when times matter. He's not important, this, that, and other. And it's two completely different parenting styles, man. And when he said that,
and neither of them's wrong.
Yeah, because it is that I'm in the house with my wife. We have two completely different parenting styles. My wife is super sweet and kind and nice, and she'll get on the kids, but she likes she's more of a player. She like a buddy, but she demands respect from them in a different way. Hey, don't talk like that. I don't want to see your underwear. Don't sag in my house. You always respect me as your mother. She got that stuff going on. Me, I'm like, didn't I tell you to wash the dishes? Nope. Get up 2 o'clock in the morning.
That's right.
Dishes not washed, man. You got to go wash them. Hey, I told you before you went to bed. I told you if it's not done the way I asked you to do it, it's consistency. It's a little bit tougher. It's a little bit harder. And it's hey, well, let them go out there. Like she didn't want to play a certain sport, and I don't want to name but she didn't want to play a certain sport, and I was like, well, no, let him go play it. He'll figure out that he don't like it. Once that ball hit him, he'll realize that this something different. So mine is more get the experience, hers is more prevention, but neither one of them are wrong.
No, it's just like, if a kid walked into the wall inside the house, my wife would run over there, baby, are you okay? I laugh.
Right.
I laugh. Like, ain't nothing wrong with you. You need to get over it. So that's my way of toughening them up.
Just
I know.
Not, man.
Yeah.
But Eric, it's funny that you say that, because sometimes the baby looks up to you like, are you laughing or are you like
Then
all
it makes
crying?
them cry even worse.
Yeah. No, if you're like, oh, that's so much fun, all of a sudden they're not going to cry because
good.
Yeah. But it's interesting
evil.
saying some of these things, Darrin, because I know that I had a situation with my son growing up, and he spent a lot of time with his mother, was homeschooling and everything, but it was always became a negotiation conflict sort of situation with her. He knew that he could wear her out, and I said, do not play this game, send him to me. She wanted to keep it because she was homeschooling him and everything, and had a little bit of a personality that wanted to be in charge of everything. I said, stop it, send him to me. Yeah. And it was the same thing. This is going to happen. I would listen. I was not trying to shut things down, but at the same time, the law was the law. And I would much rather he run into me as the law, where I will be a little bit more compassionate and gracious, than that he run into the police as the law, where he's locked up or his life gets changed. And I think the same thing, as far as taking dangers, we don't mind our children taking some dangers, but we're not going to give them a loaded shotgun and say, go play roulette. We have our certain things, and both parents are necessary to bring these, to help children develop as they should.
To navigate.
To navigate life. And Eric, let me just go back to one thing really quickly that you and Darrin were talking about. There was one lady that I met back in September, or I think it was in September, and we were talking about the issue of marriage and everything. And she said, Jeff, the first 40 years was so tough, but I had to make 40 years. I made the decision that I am not going to leave this marriage because of my religious commitment to God. And she's married 48 years, and she says that's the most wonderful thing. But she told me that she went to her husband and said, after about 40 years, why did you change? Why did you start treating me nicely? And like, they couldn't explain it. Right. But, so the idea that, I'm not using this to justify any type of abusive behavior or anything, but just to say that a lot of the marriage commitment is dependent upon us. If we're looking for an easy way out, we can get the easy way out. Our society encourages it. When we look at marriage, society talks about marriage as being a romantic sort of thing and does not talk about the reality of marriage. Mm-hmm. And we need to be able to go into things with our eyes wide open. And I think that it's through those difficult times. Eric, you mentioned your parents, how there were times that you kind of wished, man, would you guys just get rid of this?
Many
but
times.
But they also gave you a model of how to work through things. And, there are people that they don't even know how to deal with conflict. We have to teach that. We have to teach how to deal with conflict, because we go to work, there's conflict. We play a sports game, there's conflict. No matter what we do in life, there's conflict. We talk about politics, there's conflicts. And we need to be able to know how to, be forceful to present our own view and to not be swayed, but at the same time to accommodate other people and how to interact at those levels. And if we are copping out of marriages, I've heard people talk about, well, these kids these days, they don't know how to commit to anything. And I said, well, did you cop out on your marriage? Yeah. So why, this was the example you gave your kids. You copped out, and now you're looking at them and you're upset with them because they're copping out. Who did they learn it from? Yeah. And I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to say that all divorce should be outlawed. I think that divorce can be reduced tremendously. A lot of people talk about needless divorce, divorces that never should have ever have taken place. And yet our society and the law, the attorneys, the judges, our laws today facilitate that. And that is a great evil in our society. And I think it's a great disservice to our children. I think we're causing unnecessary trauma. And again, when people see that, what did they learn? They learn not to resolve things. They learn not to stick it out when it's tough. They learn to, up and leave. And we have an abandonment society as it is. We need to fight against this stuff.
Well, guys, we are just about out of time. I want to read a few of these comments before we get out of here. D Duffy 60 said, "My mom and dad were married over 65 years. They had their disagreements, but if I or my brothers or sister came into the room, they would stop and make sure we were okay." And I think that's so great. The kids have enough going on in their life. They don't need to see mom and dad's arguments, and they don't need to be a part of that. So that's really awesome that your parents was that way with you, brother. Jonathan Kendall said, "Eric, that is so important beyond divorce. Trying to rebuild a family, uniting children from different marriages has some very difficult challenges." And when he said that, I got to thinking, Jeff, Darrin, we're all from, blended families. We got remarried, and that comes along with its challenges as well, because you had two different households with two different sets of rules coming together and trying to blend together as one. And it's a process getting it there. It don't just happen right away. I think that should be one of our next episodes, fellas, talking about blending families.
Yes, I think it definitely.
Eric, can I just say, the same thing that I agree with you. It's not the ideal, but it is something that is the reality that we're facing today. So how do we do that? And one thing, personally, I would never tell anybody that I was their father. I remember when my mom got remarried and her husband was trying to tell me that, that he's my new dad. And what did that do to me? That certainly did not create any fondness in the least. No, you aren't. None of this should ever happen. And, so I don't think that we can take over the place of another person. And in fact, what I've always said is that I encourage them. I want to see them have a great relationship with their father. We've even had some talks recently about maybe, my wife's ex-husband, have him come over for the holidays. Because, and a couple of years ago, I said, listen, your children need to know that they come from two parents and that they both love them. And I said, why don't you and your ex-husband take them out for their birthday together? I don't need to be there. I'm not the one who created these children. And they need to be able to know that, hey, mom and dad, they had their things, but they're not in perpetual hatred with each other. And I think that there's something that, this is my thought. I don't know. Maybe there'll be somebody that will tell me otherwise. But if something did not happen, I think that at the very least, there is the obligation to try to minimize the damage that's been done. And I will speak from my perspective, Eric, when, my ex-wife got her divorce, married somebody else. And then, all of a sudden I became the attack of them. And I have two daughters that got married that were given away by my ex-wife's new husband, and I know it was done to hurt me, to try to attack me. How is that good? And what are children learning from that? There were a lot of things that happened that never should have happened. I don't agree with it at all. But at this point now, when you do something wrong and then you intensify things and you try to inflict additional pain and damage, I think that that's even more evil. And this is something that, Darrin, I don't know how your relation with the church, if you're a pastor or not, but I think that, pastors don't talk about this stuff. Listen, I'm sorry, you guys may be divorced and remarried and everything else. How is your relationship with your ex-spouse? What are you modeling to your kids? And, if you don't make things right between the two of you, we'll be there to help you. If you don't start to make things right and minimize the damage that you've inflicted upon your kids, you're not teaching in our church. Sorry, you're not doing this. You can still come. But we want to make sure that right now you have an obligation to your children to make things right with the other spouse. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes down to blended families, we'll never take the place of somebody's natural father or mother. And we can never, we can be a supportive of it and everything else, but you cannot say, I'm your new father, I'm your new mother. That's a bunch of crap. Mm-hmm. And it's not good for the kids because the kids are tied to their natural mother and father. And I've prayed that, that my kids have a strong relationship with their father. But I think too often, anyway, go ahead.
I've seen it, well, from my perspective, because of the whole CPS stuff, I got a different, well, not a different, but a wide scale point of view, I guess, because
got it.
I've seen both extremes. I've
Right.
seen well, I'll say this: I have seen very little homes where there's the actual biological father and mother together with the children. I've
Yeah.
seen little of them, but I've seen plenty of blended homes that resulted in a lot of abuse and neglect because somebody didn't like the stepchild. And I've also seen cases where the father or the mother was abusive to the kids and didn't really like them and
Right.
wanted to be out in the streets more and wanted their freedom and wanted to push their kids off on different family members to go get them and all that kind of stuff. And the other parent did remarry or whatever, and those kids seeing this person as their father or their mother.
Right.
So it's a wide range of things that can happen. So I say a lot of that stuff is case by case. You have to see what's the situation and what's it like.
And I agree with you on that too. I was speaking a little bit more narrowly in the fact that when sometimes, okay, I've got my divorce now, I'm going to cause my kids to hate the other parent.
There's a lot of that.
We were talking about that on here the other day.
But I'm with you 100%, Darrin.
Yeah, I'd like to see an episode that, like, being the stepfather, the stepmother sometimes isn't the easiest job, in coming in and knowing, again, there was two different sets of rules, and coming and making that family, that can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes. And it's just like we was talking about with your spouse. They have these little nitpicky things that they did and that you didn't see in the beginning. Well, the same is going to be said for that new spouse that you've got. And the new kids, they're going to have things that sometimes aggravate you or you don't get along with. And they can create big problems if you're not on top of it and learning how to communicate with each other. And I think talking about some of those skills will probably be good. So look out for that episode. Guys, we've been going for an hour. I've got to get to a meeting, but I just want to say thank you to each and every single one of you that have tuned in today. I want to say thank you to Jeff Morgan and Darrin Robinson for being awesome. As always, make sure to look down at the bottom right of that screen and subscribe and to catch every one of these Dad Talk Today episodes. Noon tomorrow, we will be back again. Gentlemen, any closing words?
We are going to keep fighting this thing, man. I love it. Father's rights, equal share parenting, and let's go out to the family courts. They need to be revamped.
Yeah, and that all I wanted to say is that Darrin is hosting an event tonight. Darrin, you're not plugging yourself, but why don't you do it for a moment, because I'm excited about what your opportunity is.
Well, so with Texas Minority Coalition, we are having an event tonight where we're doing some strategizing and planning. We see a lot of the stuff that's going on in the world right now. People trying to tear down a nuclear family. People trying to perpetuate violence and sex and pedophilia and all that stuff within our world, within our society, where we live. And so we are coming back to the table and we are strategizing, putting ways in place to fight against that at the grassroots levels. And one of those things we are definitely hitting and talking about is the father's rights. The fatherless epidemic that we have in this world in this society is off the charts. And it hits every societal ill that you could think of, whether it's alcoholism, suicide, drugs and alcohol, prison, incarceration. Fatherlessness hits all of it. So, we're tackling a bunch of those issues, but where we have to start is at the father's rights, at father's rights. So we're going to be talking about father's rights and a lot of different strategies, how to curb abortion, how to get to the heart and soul of people, because again, like I say, a lot of these other organizations and the Dems and all this stuff, man, they're going after power, control, and money, but nobody's getting to the heart of the people. So we're talking about services that actually go and target the people. And it's not about this overruling control and thing like that. So while they're neglecting them on that level, then we're going to go ahead and go with different services that go right to the heart and the soul of the people. So it's going to be a really phenomenal meeting. We're going to have Jeff there. We're going to have Robert Garza's coming tonight to tell a little bit of his story. We're going to have a couple of judges in the building. We're going to have some really, really cool event planners that I love. I love Katie and Joe Medina, man. They are some of the best event coordinators that we could ever have here in Texas. I mean, you seen what happened with the bus. You seen the boat rallies. I mean, so we got a good panel of people that we're working with, a coalition of people that we're working with to do some major new things within the conservative movement, man. I think it needs some rebranding. Because, like I said, the Dems, they are strategizing. They have shifted their tactics. And when you look at all their support, you have the government against them. You have the media against them. You have That's with them. You have Hollywood with them. You have the DOJ, the CIA. You have all of these people that are with them. And they are strategizing, they are going full force with it, and they're thinking for years ahead of time. So I think we have to re-strategize as a conservative movement and rebrand ourselves and evaluate how we approach things, especially with the new amount of diversity that we have within the party. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to tonight.
Darrin,
me too.
What's the address and what time is that kicking off?
It is 311 Stadium Drive in Waxahachie, Texas, at the La Quinta Hotel, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Awesome. Guys, make sure you're tuning into that. We might have to pre-record an episode for Wednesday. We might not be live, guys. Dad Talk, along with many other organizations, we are testifying in front of the legislature here in Atlanta, Georgia, at the Capitol for shared parenting to go down. That's and we good. Also need your support there. There's shared parenting bills going out there with these two guys, Michigan, numerous different places. I believe 2021 is going to be the year. I got to get used to saying the new year because we're almost there. Right. But I believe that's going to be the year, man. I believe we're starting to see a little crack in the system, and we got to keep pushing. But guys, nothing happens. I will see you tomorrow.
All righty. We'll be here.
Thanks so much, Eric.
See you guys. Love you.
Right,
Thank you for joining us tonight. We are fighting for the rights of parents worldwide. If you want to help support our podcast and for us to continue this mission, please join us at patreon.com/dadtalktoday. You will find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, CloutHub, Parler, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, the podcast app, Google, Apple Podcasts. We're a little bit of everywhere. And guys, every time you like and subscribe, you help us continue this mission. Thank you. And